And now we'll get to your centenarian questions here. And so how this will work is I'll ask some questions, and there are microphones in front of you, and if you feel like you want to jump in and answer a question, just grab a microphone, or I might ask you by your name. How about that? Okay, the first question here, which is exciting. What is your most memorable decade and why? Yeah, sure. You can jump in there.
Go, girl.
I've already talked a little bit about it, but for me, it's the 1940s. So many things happened during that decade, at least for me. I was in college when Pearl Harbor happened, and that sort of changed everything. Many of the young men were leaving, and I decided I would graduate early. So I got through in 3 years, and I taught school in Minnesota for 2 years. And then a friend of mine, a fellow teacher, and I were recruited to come to California. Wow, we were from Minnesota. The funny part is that my friend's dad was a Ford dealer in Minneapolis. And of course, during the war, they weren't able to have cars, sell cars. Now the war was over, he sold us a red Ford convertible. We were so excited. We drove to California. We each drive about 50 miles and then we'd trade. We were so excited. But anyway, so that was very new to us, everything in California. Then I met my future husband, and she's already told you that. And we were married in 1948. So I have to also include part of the 50s, because my 3 sons were born in the 50s. And Tom was born in 1950, Jim in 1952, and Rob in 1957. And Jim is here.
Here he is.
Okay, great, wonderful. How about, would anybody else like to say what your best decade was and why? Lois Lamb?
I have to also say the 1940s. I was with my parents on December 7th, 1941, and we were down at the racetrack in Aguacaliente, Tijuana. Did you hear me at all?
Yeah.
There was an announcement that came over the loudspeaker calling all of the active military personnel back to their stations immediately. We knew nothing about that we had been attacked. But this was such a shock to everyone. Anyway, then of course we moved to Coronado. I graduated from high school in 1940. And in 1943, I married my Navy pilot, who was killed 6 months after we were married. And then I came back, that was in Norfolk, Virginia. I came back to Coronado and started working at the air station.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Peggy, did you want to add something?
Well, I also looked at the question about the decades, and there's some highlight in all of them, but I also consider the 40s probably the year that I did a lot. I went 3,000 miles away to school and graduated, and then went back to New York and went to school. Then I had my first job. Then I got in a car, and like Lois, drove to California with another girl from New York. I bought the car for my mother. She didn't want me to go. And son worked there, and it was and then along with World War II. In World War II, I was a freshman in college, and I had no idea. My geography was very poor. I had no idea where Pearl Harbor was. And we had classmates, of course, at Stanford who were residents of Hawaii, so it became quite close to us. And several of my classmates had relatives during the Pacific War who were isolated and who did not hear from. And it was very traumatic, actually. And then, like Lois, my children on the whole were born in the 50s and the 60s. I got married. That was really quite a change in my life. Married to the Navy and first civilian, that was another thing that was a little different, you know. So, but each one had a special highlight.
Thank you, Peggy. Treasure, did you have anything on this question, or would you like to wait for another question?
I'd like to reserve it.
All right. All right, I have a question for all ladies. What is your philosophy or motto of life? Anybody like to jump in on that question? A philosophy of life?
All right, Lois Lynn.
Mine is the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated.
Oh,
And I worked
lovely.
in the civilian personnel department at North Island for 19 years, and people would come up to me and thank me because I was so helpful to them. And I always tried to think, oh, if I was in their position, you know, I would want to do something.
I'll answer that one. I learned my philosophy of life when I was in the second grade. There was a little boy, at that time, you didn't just get passed on when they kept you back. So it wasn't good to be kept back.
See.
And this little boy, is that
Just a little closer.
Oh, I want to swallow it. Anyway, it was the last day of school, and everybody was anxious to know whether anybody passed or not. So this kid came out, and I was on the other side of the street. He was on the school ground. And I hollered at him, "Chico, did you pass?" And he didn't say a word. And then I realized I had hurt him. And if he had yelled back at me and said, or cursed at me, I'd have never remembered that. But no, he put his hands in his pockets, he dropped his head, and he walked quietly off of the school ground. And I knew I had hurt him with my mouth. And I was ashamed. And I never forgot that. I still remember his name, full name, Cecil Dunn. I don't remember one other name of anybody I worked with. And that's followed me all my life. I have tried never to hurt anybody with my mouth.
I have a question here, my mic's being fixed. Knowing how much women's lives have changed over the past century, do you think women's lives are better off now?
Definitely. Compared to what our lives were in 1940. Although I really never had any complaint, and just sort of went with the flow, kind of. And I lived during the time when a woman couldn't open her own bank account. She had to have her father or her husband or somebody male take care of it. I lived in a state where you couldn't, there was so many things that you were forbidden to do because you were a woman. You couldn't, when I started my exercise class back in 1964, actually, the guy that was running the exercise class said, don't run over a mile. You're wrong. And we were all itching, and we all ended up to run half marathons and marathons. And our reputations were very protected. I mean, and so I think it is much better now.
That's wonderful. Here's another one, unless someone else has something to add on
I
that.
think women are better off, yes, but they still haven't reached the man in the pay scale.
They haven't reached the pay scale as men. Here's one, how does longevity run in your family? And if so, by who? And how old has it run in your family? Like anybody here? Just, here you go.
I had one great-grandmother who lived to be 93, so I think that was about the oldest in my family.
My paternal grandparents lived to their 80s and their 90s. I don't know about the rest of them.
How about you, Treasure?
I'll reserve.
All right, ladies, here's a great question. What makes a good day for you?
Especially a good day for me is if it's a walking buddies day. Some of you have heard about my walking buddies. We started 25 years ago. There were just 3 of us who walked 3 mornings a week. The group has grown. We are now up to 20. Wow. And we have ladies and gentlemen in our group. And the plan has always been that we meet, we walk, we have a prayer circle, we come back, we have coffee, and now it's become a walking and talking group, because we do a lot of talking. So we know each other very well, all the secrets. The trouble for me is that as I'm getting older, my hearing isn't too good, and there are usually about 5 conversations going on. So I miss half of what's going on. But the group is so united and so close that we feel we can call anyone, anytime, day or night. And so it's been really a lifesaver for me.
Lois, that's coffee and goodies.
Very nice. Anybody else, what makes a good day?
I think just waking up and saying, wow, I'm still here. And then being able to get up and out of bed and walk, you know? Just little things like that. And I'm very blessed with a great family who sees to it that I don't sit at home and do nothing. Actually, tomorrow, my daughter and I are going to the movies. Yeah. We're going to see a Barbie. And my son, who is quite a hiker, knows how much I miss my backpacking days. Sees to it that we get a ride up to the lagunas or in Cuyamaca once in a while and just sit under a tree, which is pretty great. So I consider myself very, very fortunate. So
Very nice. Very nice.
My day of having a good time is an afternoon bridge game with old friends.
It's very nice. And ladies, how do you define well-being, your well-being? Well-being, your wellness, your well-being. How do you define it?
well, you know what I do. Cynthia's my trainer. I go to Cynthia because if I didn't go to Cynthia, I wouldn't go to anything. And I would just sit and do nothing. And so she keeps me moving. And now we have a new course called Yoga Fit, which I've joined, which is at the gym in the hospital. And I'm able to walk down there. I'm still able to walk down there and walk back.
Wonderful. Let's continue. Anybody else have any feedback on that, or would you like to continue? Okay. Well, on that same note, a couple of you fed some information out on this. What do you do to stay healthy? Peggy, you jumped in there. Lois, you go to your walks. And Treasure, I sat with you, and you do something with your dog.
Yay.
You go out for walks with your dog, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How many times a day do you go out with your dog? 3 or 4 times a day.
Way to go.
Way to go. Anything else on that?
Can I add something to that?
Sure.
She walks to the beach club and has a glass of wine.
Everybody would want to know that.
I've seen it.
That'll do it.
What did you want to add on that?
I don't even charge me for it.
Get the microphone. I do know a little bit more. I have sat with her. It's a treasure to sit with Treasure. All right. Here's an interesting one that affects all of us. What do you do when you get stressed out?
I don't get stressed out.
I believe it, Treasure.
It's the wine.
Treasure, use the microphone. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Go
What did you
ahead.
say? What did you say?
I
Have a glass of wine.
Anybody else? What do you do? Do you get stressed out at all?
Didn't you hear me? I don't get stressed out.
Okay. Anybody else like to jump in on that?
If I do get stressed out, I talk it over with my family.
Oh, nice.
I didn't hear your question.
Peggy, what do you do when you get stressed out?
Oh, stress.
My husband told me that I didn't worry enough. I sort of.
Oh my God.
All right. Technology. Love it, hate it. Use it, and what type of technology?
I do everything. Actually, I am one of the people way back, and I don't know what year it was, but along with some other older folks, worked in the back of the library and transferred the card catalog to the computers. Old Radio Shack computers. And most of the people that I worked with are no longer here. And then from then, I worked my way up through and I used to supervise or help supervise the computer lab at the library, where I made a lot of my friends. And my daughter put me on the cell phone, and so he told me I couldn't see the pictures that she had published unless I went on Facebook, which I must say is a really kind of a time waster. And I email, and I text. I had people in the lot. One time I was sitting in a waiting room in the airport, and some lady saw me texting a message to one of my children, and they said, You text? So I said, that's easier than talking.
Well, I've learned a lot of the things that I do, text and computers and get cell phones but I'm not the top notch, any of them. I hope they don't develop too many more new things. But I do appreciate very much having a cell phone. I don't know how we did all our traveling and other activities before we had one. If I'm lost, if I'm not carrying that with me.
I'll share that. Oh, had Lois Land?
I took computer lessons when I was 75 years old.
Nice.
And I do everything except I don't have a smartphone.
Very nice. Smart lady. Who was the most influential person in your life and why? Who made the biggest impact on you?
I can't say one person who was the most influential, but my grandmother who lived with us, because she became a widow early in her life. She was very close with me. We shared stories, we read the Bible together, and when she would go, sometimes she used to house sit for people and she'd take me with her. So we were very close, and I just was comfortable with her, and she was helpful to me.
Way to go. Very nice.
Thank you.
Makes a difference.
I can't say that there was any one person that influenced my life, but I would see someone that I admired, and I would try to emulate them.
I think you have several people that influence you. My father was a big influence in that he encouraged me when I decided to wanted to go far, far away to college. And he was most influential in me to encourage me. He also influenced me to get an education where I would be able to work
Yes.
if I got married and couldn't and needed to work or go back to work for anything. And I was always very grateful that I had that education and would have been able to take care of myself, because he had taken care of people who were left widowed and were totally, that was another thing that women had to contend with. They had no education, they couldn't work, there was no one who would hire them.
Right.
And I'm very grateful to him for that.
Very nice. What was the most exciting thing you've ever done in your whole life?
Flying. Not getting there, and not in the pilot, but being the pilot.
Yes.
A little closer, real close, and tell the whole story.
I don't want to tell the whole story. At the very end. Okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't want to do it at the very end.
Oh, you want
But
to?
I want to answer that question. Flying, well, I was the pilot. So that's what
We'll save that for the end. The woman story at the end.
Oh, absolutely. You could use that one, it works pretty well. It's nice and close to your mouth now.
Well, you asked for the most exciting things, is that it?
Exciting thing you've done in your life.
Right. There have been several, but when my husband was in the Navy, we moved around a lot, and so we had a lot of excitement, really. We lived from Kittery Point, Maine, all the way down to Key West, Florida, at various places. But my husband was a submariner, and when he had command of his submarine, it was a diesel submarine, he was finally allowed to take dependents out on his submarine. So we got to go out with his submarine and dive and come back up again.
Wow.
And that was very exciting. But then a friend of ours became the first commanding officer of the Nautilus, which was the first atomic submarine. Well, when he finally had taken all the influential senators out on his boat, he got to take some of us dependents, and my husband and I were invited to go to sea on the Nautilus for a day. And we again dove under the water and came back up. And he brought us up on the bridge to see how the water was still dripping off. And so it was very exciting. And the Nautilus is now a museum in Groton, Connecticut, right by New London.
That is exciting.
Another exciting part of my life was all the travels that we took after we retired. We traveled also almost, well, in Europe mostly, but we also went to some places, Asian places. And when we took a trip to South Korea. It was sponsored by the Korean Airlines, and we paid our own ways, but when we got there, they said you're to wear your name tags all the time because we want to say thank you to Americans for helping South Korea. And they entertained us with thank you. But the exciting part was we got to go to the DMZ, and we saw this long table with the North Korean representative on one end and the South Korean on the other. And then we could look out and say, that's North Korea and this is South Korea. And I thought of it a lot this week, and the young man at the DMZ went to the North Korea, so I don't know what's going to happen to him. But it was very exciting for us. And the fun part of it was, since the Korean Airlines was sponsoring the trip, they told us on our way back if we wanted to stop in Hawaii for 4 days.
Anybody else? Peggy?
I have several exciting things, mostly to do with travel. Trekking in Nepal with my husband was quite an adventure. Our river at Annapurna and our trip to Antarctica. And my exciting trips, backpacking in the High Sierra, bicycling in France. Mostly things in the out of doors were the exciting trip.
Lovely. Ladies, what would you tell a young person today for some advice?
Me?
Anybody?
Well, I was reminded before I came today to tell the young people to start their savings account as soon as possible. My comment is set a goal and go for it.
Yeah, I'm with Lois. Don't take your chances and go for it. If you want something you want to do and you have a dream, make your dream come true.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? On that same note, on that same kind of note, what advice would you give to your younger self? Now that you're here,
What would you give to your younger self? What advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I don't know if I would answer that, but it's almost the same as
Well,
what we.
don't hesitate to try and do what you want to do, which is what I would tell me, and that's what I would tell others.
Okay. And Lois?
Go for it.
Well,
Follow your dreams.
Do Lois. Let's have Lois, Rosanna first, and then Lois Lynn. Go ahead, Lois, Rosanna.
what was the question?
All right, we'll start over. What advice would you give your younger self?
Well, I think, as most of the others said, take advantages of anything that comes up, learn and value your family, stay close with your family. But also as you start in your career, think about the future, because so many people get to the end and they're not ready for it. We had one of my husband's commanders told us, start saving young. Well, we hardly could do that but we'd use up all our money by the end of the month, sometimes be overdrawn. But he convinced us that we should do something, and we ended up buying 10 shares of Coca-Cola. But a year later, they split 3 ways, so we now have 30 shares of Coca-Cola. But it just shows you that it's important to start early and think about the future.
I don't give advice. My kids wouldn't take it if I did.
That was a good one.
Treasure, we're getting back to the question of what is the most exciting thing you've done in your life again. We're rounding back in that question again.
Oh.
Treasure, what is the most exciting thing you've done in your life?
I'll pass.
Treasure, it's time.
It's on the time. It's the end. This is it. You mean we're coming close to the end.
You care if I stand
I
up?
don't care.
I talk better standing up.
Of course.
The best time in my whole life was, not the best time, but it was a very interesting time. It was World War II. And both myself and my to-be husband were graduating from college. He got out of college and he wanted to join. He did not want to be put into the military. So he joined he wanted to get into the flying part, but he had a bad eye, and some of the others, so he took the Army. There was a thing in the Army that said, if you go to the Army and you want to get out, you want to get in, rather, you put out your arm, and they take a hold of it, and if it's warm, they take hold of it. Well, he got in. I guess his arm was warm. And when he got in, he found out how to become an officer. So they told him the place to learn was down in the south, because that's where they were teaching. So they got on a train. We're getting close to Georgia, a big part of Georgia, and they found out that was where they were to stay for a year and a half. So they were going very slow. They weren't going slow, but they were on the train, and they knew they were getting close to Georgia. When all of a sudden, all the black people on that car got up and walked to the back. I was astounded. I said, where's those people all going? He said, we just crossed the Mason-Dixon line. Well, the Mason-Dixon line, if you don't remember, was to keep the black people in line. It was things they could and couldn't do. It was pretty evident in some of the things when we landed at the airport, down there, not the airport, we were on a train, I don't think we landed at the airport. The black people could not buy any food. There were 2 drinking fountains, 2 restrooms, and I thought this was not good. And we got off the train, and the first time I had to go to the grocery store, I had to take a bus, town bus, and when I got on, it was empty. Well, I went to the very back, because that was my favorite place to sit in Kansas. Well, nobody said a thing to me. There was nobody else there except the driver. And so we got, at the very next stop, a black man got on. Well, he walked slowly down the aisle and just stood there. And I thought, why doesn't that guy sit down all these seats? And then I happened to look up the front where the driver was, and it says, blacks in the back, whites in the middle, in the front. And I was really mad at that bus driver. I knew exactly what he was thinking. I'll teach this damn Yankee how to act in the South. Well, after he finished his training, we went to where the ship was to take them to the war zone. Now, I followed, of course. Many, many women followed their husbands. And there were tears flowing everywhere. And I looked around and I thought, this is not good. It's not, I know it's sad, but it isn't doing your husband any good to be crying all over the place. So I put a happy thing on my face, a happy look, and we had 7 days of great fun before he had to leave. Well, the ship was about to leave, and it was stocked with all kinds of food, all kinds of equipment for war, and all kinds of men. And they got in that boat, in that ship, and they sailed down, and with the wives, including myself, was on the shore. That was a very sad day. We looked at that ship, and we knew that a lot of these men were not coming back. And even though some of the ones that were coming back with injuries that would last a lifetime. That was a bad time. As we watched as the ship went out and disappeared into the fog, and then on to the next battlefield, the bloody field, waiting for them. All of a sudden, not all of a sudden, because I'd known it back here, but I wasn't thinking about it, it's on you now. You've got to figure out everything. Well, I thought, I only know one person in this state. What am I going to do? So I remembered one of the people in his outfit lived in LA. So I found a way down there I was in San Francisco. And I looked up his wife, and luckily she had a home and an extra bedroom because her husband was on the same ship. So I said, hey, can I rent your room? She said, yeah. And so I rented a room, and I was in there 3 more years while the war raged on. I got a job, and she worked nights, and I worked days. Well, I knew no one in the area, no one anyplace around, and I was scared. And at night, I used to go to bed before it got dark. because I was so scared. And then he was sent back and to his unit. Oh no, that's wrong. Anyway, I'm stuck. I was stuck, all right. Oh, to get back, we went to where we used to live. And we raised our children there. And then too, my husband fell in love. Well, the woman had a great body. She had 2 wings. He fell in love with flying. He spent many, many hours at the airport, and talking piloting all the time. But he couldn't afford a plane at that time. So he did scrape up enough money to take a few lessons, and so there we were. And then, let's see, it's a long time ago. I know, he figured out a way to get a plane. We had a plane do a flip in the airport. And the reason we did it is because it was insecurely fastened, and a big wind came along at night and flipped it over. And that about ruined that plane. But he thought, oh well, this guy's going to want to sell this plane. So he found him. He said, hey, you want to buy a plane? You want to sell your plane? The guy said, sure. So he went home, got his flatbed truck, and he picked all the pieces of the plane out, put it on the back of the truck, went home, he had a big garage thing, a building really, out back that was empty, put it in there and worked 1 year putting that darn thing together. And every once in a while, somebody had to come out and check it and okay it before he could go on, because you don't want a defective plane. And my son is here today, and I'm sure he is grinding his teeth because he hated every minute he had to work on that plane.
Fucking rivets.
Yeah. So then, after a while, we moved. My husband got a better job opportunity, and we moved to Indio. I went back to teaching, and he ran about 3 truck stops in Indio. And then his health began to fail. And so we sold that place and moved to near Alpine, and that way. And then his health really was getting worse, but we had to sell the airplane because he couldn't fly anymore. But, I forgot to tell you, how he got me into it. When he learned to fly, he kept pushing me to learn to fly. Well, I wasn't very interested in learning to fly. So anyway, one day he said, let's go for a ride. So we went for a ride, and he said to me, look down there. Well, what's down there? A big city, that's all it is. I said, what are you talking about? He said, I want to ask you a question. He said, what if I have a heart attack right now and die? Right here on this seat. What would you do? I figured that out real fast. I was down knocking on the door of the guy that taught you how to fly real fast. Anyway, I learned to fly. I had a lot of fun, but I scared a lot of people. And then I thought, I know, it was the last thing that you do before you get your license. You have to go 200 miles, and you have to stop and have your chart book or whatever it is signed at 2 airports so that they're sure that you went there. Well, I wasn't I didn't want to do that too much. But he said, hey, see those mountains up there? He said, get in the airplane, fly over those mountains, not under or through, but over those mountains, and you'll be in Bakersfield. Land in Bakersfield, get your book signed, and then outside of Bakersfield, when you get up in the air again, there's a highway that runs from Bakersfield to the next airport. Straight, and you can't see, there's nothing down there except dirt. So I got on that, down I went, I saw the airport, he's right. And so I called him. I knew I was at 10,000 feet. So I knew I had to get down to lower level, the land, in other words. And so I started to lose that altitude. I started to turn. And when I turn, I lose sight of the airport. Then I go back out on that road and come down again, started to turn, kept losing the airport. And then the man calls and he said, Cessna 487 Bravo, where are you now? And I said, well, sir, I'm out here. I'm 10,000 feet, and I start to try to lose my altitude, and you guys keep moving the airport. Well, I thought that was funny. But he didn't. But he still signed my book. And then I got back where the FAA approves you or disapproves you, and he approved me.
Great. We have to start concluding our stories. That was a wonderful story.
Hey, treasure.
What a pilot.
What a pilot.
What a pilot.
All I can say at this point is bravo. Bravo, ladies. Bravo, with model centenarians like these, it's clear aging is just a number. Would you agree? Yes. We have truly witnessed that these older adults are strong and powerful. Let's all together keep the momentum going. Thank you, ladies, for coming.